I stood in the small gallery anteroom with my back against the door, listening to hundreds of guests celebrating the biggest night of my career just beyond the threshold. In front of me sat Victor and Scarlett Hayes, the people who gave birth to me and then threw me away like broken pottery. Their debt collectors flanked them like sentries. Between us on the polished mahogany table lay a stack of contracts, each page a new demand, a new way to strip away everything I had built. Victor's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Sign these or we destroy you. We'll tell everyone the truth about the ungrateful foster child who abandoned her dying mother." The threat hung in the air, heavy and toxic. My hands should have been shaking. My voice should have been trembling. But I'd been preparing for this moment since I was 14 years old, sitting on a cold floor, listening to them divide up their children and leave my name out entirely. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a small frame. Inside, preserved under glass and sealed with veins of pure gold, was a fragment of dried clay, split clean down the middle. The clay fox I'd been making that night, the night they broke me, the night I started learning how to repair myself. I set it on top of their contracts with deliberate care. "This is my answer." I said, my voice quiet but steady as steel. "This is the piece you threw away when you decided I wasn't worth fighting for. I kept it. I repaired it. I sealed the cracks with gold, and it's my permanent reminder of why I will never sign anything you put in front of me." Scarlett's face crumpled. Victor's jaw tightened. But I wasn't finished. "The answer is no. You want to know how a 14-year-old girl became invisible to her own parents, how I learned that some people will divide up their children like furniture and throw away the pieces that don't fit. Stay with me. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of survival, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Because this is where it started. The night I stopped being someone's daughter. I was 14, sitting on the bare floor of my stripped bedroom. No bed, no dresser. Just cold hardwood and thin walls. My parents had sold everything piece by piece, funding their war against each other. In my hands, I had cheap dollar store clay, trying desperately to make something that wouldn't fall apart. My fingers were numb. They'd turned the heat down to save money for lawyers. Then I heard it. Downstairs. Their voices like breaking glass. "I'm taking Chloe!" Scarlett screamed. "Fine!" Victor's roar shook the walls. "I'm taking Liam!" Silence. I waited, held my breath, waited for my name, waited for one of them to remember they had 3 children, not 2. Nothing. The clay fox in my hands slipped, hit the floor, split down the middle with a crack that sounded like something inside me breaking. I stared at the 2 halves, and I understood. I was the leftover, the one nobody wanted, the spare part they were leaving behind. I didn't cry. Crying made me a target. Instead, I picked up both pieces of that broken fox and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. If they could throw me away this easily, I'd make damn sure I survived it. 3 weeks later, I sat alone on a courthouse bench while they met with their lawyers in separate rooms. Separate lawyers. Separate futures. And me, I wasn't even in their equations. When they finally called my name, I walked into that courtroom and saw exactly what I'd become to them. My mother on one side, her attorney in a burgundy suit, sharp as a knife. My father on the other, his silver-haired lawyer looking bored like this was just another case, just another broken family. Neither parent looked at me. Not once. Judge Evelyn Thorne presided, a black woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the paperwork with a frown deepening between her brows. "Neither party has submitted a specific care plan for the minor child Alyssa Vance," she said, her voice carrying the particular coldness reserved for parents who fail their children. "Mr. Hayes, you've requested custody of Liam, age 12. Mrs. Hayes, you've requested custody of Chloe, age 8. The judge looked up then directly at me. "Alyssa, do you have anything you'd like to say to the court?" I looked at my mother. She was studying her manicured nails. I looked at my father. He was checking his watch. Neither of them would meet my eyes. I stood up, my legs shaking, but my voice somehow steady. "I just want to be somewhere someone actually wants me." Those words would echo through my mind for years, a mantra of pain and longing. The judge's expression softened just slightly, a hairline crack in her professional armor. The minor child, Alyssa Vance, is hereby remanded to the care of the state pending placement in an appropriate foster home. That's how I ended up at Willow Creek Group Home, a place that was clean and organized and utterly devoid of warmth. Mrs. Holloway, the director, gave me the tour with a smile that never reached her eyes. She showed me the schedule posted in the kitchen, a dense grid of times and rules. Lights out at 9, no talking during meals, no locked doors, which she explained was for safety, but really meant constant surveillance. I shared a room with 3 other girls. There was Sarah, who bit her nails down to bloody half-moons and never spoke above a whisper. There was Rachel, who rocked herself to sleep every night. And there was a girl whose name I never learned because she was gone within a week. We had twin beds with thin mattresses and scratchy gray blankets. We had one small dresser to share. We had a bathroom down the hall that always smelled like mildew and cheap soap. The rules were simple. Take up as little space as possible. Keep your emotions invisible. Don't cry after lights out. Don't ask questions. Don't stand out. I learned to fold myself smaller and smaller to move through the rooms like a shadow. But I also learned something else. I learned to salvage. Behind the group home there was a small yard that backed onto an empty lot full of trash and weeds. I started collecting things other people threw away. Broken glass smoothed by time and weather. Bits of colored tile, scraps of metal, pieces of pottery. I hid them in a shoebox under my bed, handling them like treasures. Mrs. Holloway's son Justin was 17 and cruel in the casual way of teenage boys who've never been told no. He came into our room one afternoon when I was alone and found my sketchbook the one place where I let my thoughts escape. He flipped through it, smirking at my drawings of birds and broken things. Then he tore out 3 pages, ripped them into confetti, and let the pieces flutter to the floor. "Just trash," he said. "Like everything else here." After he left, I sat on my bed and stared at the torn paper scattered across the scratched linoleum. Something hard settled in my chest. I gathered every piece, smoothed them out as best I could, and started drawing on the backs. If he was going to break my things, I would make something new from the destruction. I started building a tiny sculpture from the broken glass I'd collected, fitting the pieces together with craft glue stolen from the common room. It wasn't beautiful, but it was mine, and it was whole in a way I wasn't. I lasted 4 months at Willow Creek before the incident that got me labeled as difficult to place. Mrs. Holloway found my box of broken things and threw it away, calling it trash and a safety hazard. I didn't scream or fight. I just stopped following the rules. Stopped speaking at all, actually. Selective mutism, they called it when the state psychologist evaluated me. A trauma response. They moved me out within a week. Sarah Jenkins, a social worker who looked barely out of college herself, came to pick me up in a Honda Civic that smelled like coffee and French fries. She had dark skin box braids pulled into a ponytail and an air of no-nonsense practicality that I found oddly comforting. She didn't try to comfort me or tell me it would all be okay. She just said, "Sometimes things don't work out. It's not your fault. We'll find somewhere better." In the car, I noticed a small cut on my hand from a piece of the glass sculpture I'd managed to save before Mrs. Holloway threw everything away. It stung, but I didn't mind. The pain felt clarifying, like it cut through all the numbness and reminded me I still existed. Sarah noticed me touching the cut. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Good," she said. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm taking you to the Olson family. Eleanor and Marcus Olson. They've been fostering kids for 12 years. They're good people, Alyssa. Real good people. I need you to give them a chance." The Olson house was nothing like Willow Creek. It was an old craftsman-style home in the Riverside neighborhood with a sagging porch and wind chimes that sang in the breeze. The paint was chipping in places and the yard was overgrown with wildflowers and herbs. When we pulled up, I could smell something baking. Something warm and sweet that made my stomach ache with hunger I'd been ignoring for months. Eleanor Olson opened the door before we knocked. She was a round black woman in her 50s with gray streaked braids wrapped in a colorful scarf, wearing an apron dusted with flour and a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "You must be Alyssa," she said, and her voice was warm molasses, slow and sweet. "Come on in, baby." I just pulled banana bread out of the oven. The house was chaos in the best way. There were 5 other foster kids living there ranging in age from 6 to 17. The walls were covered in artwork, a riot of color and creativity. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable, everything slightly worn in a way that said people actually lived here. The kitchen was the heart of the home, a big room with butcher block counters and open shelves displaying handmade pottery in shades of blue and green and gold. Eleanor didn't bombard me with questions. She just made me a plate with thick slices of banana bread still steaming from the oven and a glass of cold milk. She sat across from me at the big wooden table, her hands wrapped around her own mug of tea, and said, "I know you've had a rough time, Alyssa. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but you should know in this house we've got a few simple rules. Be kind. Be honest. If you break something, we fix it together. And everyone has a job because we're a family and families take care of each other." I swallowed hard around the lump in my throat. A family. The word felt foreign and forbidden, but there was something in Eleanor's eyes, a steadiness and genuine warmth that made me want to believe it might be possible. Marcus Olson came home just before dinner. He was a tall, lean black man with graying temples and hands scarred from years of metalwork. He was a welder and sculptor I would learn later, specializing in architectural ironwork and kinetic sculptures. He didn't say much when Eleanor introduced us, just studied me with kind, observant eyes and nodded. Then he went to a closet and came back with a pair of work gloves and a canvas apron. "You'll get cold working in the studio," he said, his voice deep and quiet. "You'll need protection." It was the first time anyone had looked at me and seen something other than a problem to be solved. He saw someone who might want to create, who might need tools instead of therapy. I took the gloves and apron with shaking hands and whispered, "Thank you." That night, lying in a room I shared with 2 other girls, but which felt infinitely more spacious than Willow Creek, I cried for the first time in months. But they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of something I was afraid to name. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of healing. 2 weeks into living with the Olsons, Eleanor took me to her pottery studio. It was a converted garage behind the house filled with kick wheels and shelves of greenware and the earthy smell of wet clay. Sunlight streamed through skylights, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Eleanor's work was everywhere, bowls and vases and sculptural pieces, each one unique and beautiful. But what caught my eye were the pieces displayed on a special shelf near the window. They were bowls and cups, each one clearly broken at some point, and then repaired with what looked like veins of gold running through the cracks. The gold didn't hide the damage. It highlighted it, turning the breaks into the most beautiful part of each piece. "That's kintsugi," Eleanor said, coming to stand beside me. "It's a Japanese technique. When something breaks, instead of throwing it away or hiding the damage, you repair it with lacquer mixed with gold. The philosophy is that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. The cracks are part of its history, part of what makes it unique." I reached out and traced one of the golden seams with my finger. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Eleanor smiled. "Would you like to learn?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. And that's how it started. Eleanor taught me to work with clay, to feel its weight and texture, to coax it into shapes that felt right in my hands. She taught me patience, the kind that comes from watching something dry and fire and transform. And when I inevitably created something that cracked or broke, she taught me kintsugi, the art of repair with gold. It wasn't just about pottery. It was about seeing brokenness not as an ending, but as a beginning. It was about taking damage and transforming it into beauty. It was about the radical idea that I, with all my cracks and broken pieces, might be worth repairing, might be worth gold. Marcus taught me metalworking in his studio, a space that smelled like rust and fire and possibility. He showed me how to cut and bend steel, how to weld pieces together with showers of golden sparks. He taught me that metal, when heated to the right temperature, becomes soft and malleable. That pressure and heat don't destroy it, they transform it into something stronger. He didn't talk much while we worked, but occasionally he'd pause and say something profound in his quiet way. Iron remembers, he told me once while I was struggling with a piece that kept warping. It remembers every strike, every bend. It builds up stress, and eventually it breaks. But if you anneal it, heat it up, and let it cool slowly, it releases that stress, becomes stronger, more flexible. You understand. I understood. He wasn't just talking about metal. The other kids in the Olson house became something I never thought I'd have again: siblings. There was Gabriel Eleanor and Marcus's biological son, 18 years old and studying engineering at the community college. He treated me like a little sister from day one, teasing me gently and teaching me terrible jokes. There was Jasmine, 16, who painted murals and taught me about color theory. There was twins Michael and Michelle, both 13, who pulled me into their elaborate fantasy games. There was little Zoe, 8, who followed me around like a duckling and asked me to read to her every night. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I had a place at the table. I had people who noticed if I was quiet or sad. I had adults who actually showed up to school meetings and remembered my birthday. Slowly, carefully, like a plant unfurling toward sunlight, I began to grow. I excelled in school, particularly in art classes. My teachers noticed my talent and encouraged me to apply for a special program at Ironbridge Arts Collective, a community art center in downtown Riverton that offered classes and studio space to promising young artists. Eleanor and Marcus not only supported the application, they drove me to the interview and waited in the lobby. Marcus reading a welding magazine and Eleanor knitting something blue and soft. The interview was with Lainey Monroe, though I didn't know that's who she'd become yet. She was in her 40s, with paint permanently staining the cuticles of her nails and clay dust in her graying hair. Her studio at Ironbridge was filled with the same kind of golden repair work Eleanor did, but on a larger scale. Sculptural pieces, some of them 3 feet tall, covered in intentional breaks that were sealed with precious metal. "Tell me why you want to be here," she said, her eyes sharp and assessing. I showed her my portfolio, a battered sketchbook filled with drawings and photographs of my work. Small sculptures made from found objects. Ceramic pieces I'd made in Eleanor's studio, some of them deliberately broken and repaired. Welded metal assemblages that Marcus had helped me create. She studied each page carefully, occasionally asking questions about process or intention. When she got to a photograph of my first successful kintsugi piece, a small bowl with a single crack running from rim to base, sealed with a thick line of gold, she paused. "Tell me about this one." "I made it when I first came to live with Eleanor and Marcus." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It cracked in the kiln because I built up the walls too thin in one spot. I thought I'd ruined it. Eleanor showed me how to fix it with gold instead of just throwing it away. She said the crack was the most important part." "And what do you think?" Lainey asked. "Is the crack the most important part?" I thought about my own life, about the night my parents divided up their children like property and left me out of the equation entirely, about the cold floors and colder silences, about finding Eleanor and Marcus, and this strange, beautiful second chance. "Yes," I said finally. "The crack is proof that something survived being broken. The gold is proof that someone thought it was worth saving." Lainey smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You're in. Welcome to Ironbridge." I spent the next 4 years dividing my time between school, the Olson house, and Ironbridge. I learned advanced techniques in ceramics and metalwork. I learned about art history and contemporary practice. I learned about myself, about the kind of work I wanted to make and the kind of artist I wanted to become. My work developed a distinctive style. I created sculptural pieces that combined ceramics and metalwork objects that were deliberately broken and then meticulously repaired with various metals: copper, silver, brass, and always gold. I made bowls that looked like they'd been dropped and then lovingly pieced back together. I made figures of women and children with golden scars running across their bodies. I made abstract pieces that were all fracture and repair damage transformed into beauty. Lainey became a mentor and eventually a close friend. She encouraged me to show my work in student exhibitions, to apply for scholarships, to think about art school. When I expressed doubt, she would look at me with those sharp eyes and say, "Alyssa, your work speaks truth. Don't you dare hide it because you're afraid." But fear was always there, lurking at the edges of my newfound stability. Fear that it would all be taken away. Fear that I wasn't worthy of this second chance. Fear that one day Eleanor and Marcus would decide I was too much trouble and send me back into the system. Those fears seemed confirmed when, just before my 18th birthday, Scarlett and Victor Hayes re-entered my life. The first contact came through Sarah Jenkins, who was still my caseworker, even though I was about to age out of the system. She called me into her office with an expression I couldn't read. "Alyssa," she said carefully, "your biological parents have requested contact. You're almost 18, which means you get to decide whether or not you want to respond." My hands went cold. What do they want? They didn't say specifically, just that they want to reconnect with you. I thought about the 14-year-old girl sitting on a cold floor, waiting for her name to be called. I thought about the silence that followed. "No," I said. "I don't want any contact." Sarah nodded unsurprised. "That's your right. I'll let them know." But they didn't give up that easily. A week before my 18th birthday, a package arrived at the Olsen house. Inside was a birthday card with a generic message, "To our daughter," signed by both Scarlett and Victor. There was also a letter explaining that they'd both gotten sober, gone through therapy, and wanted to make amends. They wanted to be a family again. I read the letter in Marcus's workshop, my hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. Marcus was at his welding bench, working on a commission, giving me space but staying present. When I finally spoke, my voice was raw. They want to make amends, like they can just apologize and everything will be okay. Marcus turned off his torch and pushed up his welding helmet. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at me with those wise, patient eyes. Finally, he spoke. "You don't owe them forgiveness, Alyssa. Forgiveness isn't something anyone can demand from you. It's something you give if and when you're ready, and only if it serves you. What they're asking for, that's not about you. That's about them trying to feel better about themselves." "What do I do?" I whispered. "What do you want to do?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. What did I want? "I want them to know that I survived without them," I said slowly. "I want them to know that they didn't break me even though they tried. I want them to see what I became in spite of them, not because of them." Marcus nodded. "Then show them. Live your life. Make your art. Become everything they said you wouldn't be." That's the best revenge there is. I turned 18 and officially aged out of the foster system, but the Olsens made it clear I always had a home with them. I enrolled at Riverton Community College to study art, working part-time at a local coffee shop to cover expenses. I continued creating work at Ironbridge, developing my portfolio for eventual transfer to a 4-year art school. Life was good, not perfect. There were still hard days and moments when the old fears crept in, but good. I had people who loved me. I had work that mattered to me. I had a future that felt possible. And then, Scarlett and Victor escalated. It started small, a friend request on social media, an email to my school account asking about my classes, a message through the Ironbridge website asking about purchasing my work. Each time I ignored them. Each time they found another avenue to reach me. Then Victor showed up at Ironbridge on a Saturday afternoon when I was working in the communal studio. I was focused on a large ceramic piece, my hands covered in slip, when I sensed someone watching me. I looked up and there he was, standing in the doorway. He'd aged in the 4 years since I'd seen him. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But the calculating expression was the same. "Alyssa," he said, like we'd just seen each other yesterday, like he hadn't thrown me away. "Your work is impressive. I had no idea you were so talented." I carefully set down my tools and wiped my hands on my apron, buying time to get my racing heart under control. "What do you want?" "I want to talk to you, to explain, to make things right." "There's nothing to explain," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You and Scarlett made your choices. I'm making mine. I don't want you in my life." His expression hardened slightly, the mask slipping. "Is that any way to talk to your father?" "You're not my father," I said, and the words felt powerful, liberating. "Marcus Olsen is more of a father than you ever were. Now please leave." He left, but the encounter shook me. That night I told Eleanor and Marcus what had happened. Eleanor's face went tight with anger, something I rarely saw from her. "That man has some nerve," she said. "Alyssa, honey, do you want us to get a restraining order?" "I don't know if that would help," I said. "I just want them to leave me alone." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "Document everything. Every contact, every attempt. Keep records. If they escalate, we'll have evidence." They escalated. Over the next year, as I thrived in college and built my reputation as an emerging artist, Scarlett and Victor became more aggressive in their attempts to re-establish contact. They showed up at my college campus. They sent letters to Eleanor and Marcus's house. They even contacted some of my professors claiming they were concerned about me and wanted to support my education. It all came to a head when I was 21 and preparing for my first solo exhibition at a small gallery in downtown Riverton. The show, titled Golden Fractures, would feature 15 large-scale pieces all exploring themes of trauma repair and resilience. It was the culmination of 3 years of work and represented everything I'd overcome. 2 weeks before the opening, I received a letter from Victor's lawyer. Inside was a contract stating that Victor and Scarlett were claiming partial intellectual property rights to my work, arguing that their emotional and financial investment in my early years entitled them to a percentage of any profits from my art career. They were demanding 30% of all past and future sales, plus retroactive payment for my upbringing costs. I stared at the letter in disbelief. They'd done nothing for me, literally thrown me away, and now they wanted to profit from my success. I immediately called Sarah Jenkins, who was now a friend and mentor, even though I'd aged out of her caseload. She put me in touch with Mara Rossi, a sharp lawyer who specialized in family law and abuse cases. Mara took one look at the contract and laughed, though there was no humor in it. "This is bullshit," she said bluntly. "They have no legal standing whatsoever. They relinquished all parental rights when the judge remanded you to state care. They have no claim to your work or your income. But," she added, her expression growing serious, "the fact that they're trying, this means they're desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. We need to shut this down hard and fast." Mara drafted a response that was basically a legal middle finger. She cited case law referenced their abandonment included statements from Eleanor Marcus and Sarah documenting my journey through foster care. She made it clear that any further contact would be considered harassment and would result in immediate legal action. We sent the letter. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days before my exhibition opening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my blood went cold. It was from Scarlett, and it was a threat disguised as a plea. "Alyssa, I've tried to reach you so many times to make amends to be part of your life again. You've rejected me at every turn. I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. I deserve to be acknowledged. If you don't agree to meet with me and Victor before your exhibition, I'll be forced to tell the press the real story about the ungrateful foster child who abandoned her dying mother and helpless little sister, about how we tried everything to keep our family together, and you chose strangers over your own blood. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking with rage. Then I forwarded it to Mara, to Sarah, to Eleanor and Marcus. I documented it like Marcus had taught me. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them control my narrative anymore. I sat down and rewrote my exhibition statement from scratch. Instead of the polished professional artist statement I'd originally drafted, I wrote the truth. My truth. I wrote about being 14 and sitting on a cold floor listening to my parents divide up their children and leave me out. I wrote about Willow Creek and Justin tearing my sketchbook and Mrs. Holloway throwing away my treasures. I wrote about finding Eleanor and Marcus and learning that broken things could be repaired with gold. I wrote about kintsugi as a metaphor for survival. And I wrote about Scarlett and Victor, not naming them directly, but making it clear that the people who gave birth to me were not my family. That family isn't biology. It's choice and commitment and showing up. It's seeing someone's cracks and deciding they're worth gold. The night of the opening arrived. Foundry Hall, the gallery hosting my exhibition, was packed with people. Local artists, professors from the college, collectors, reporters from the arts section of the Riverton Tribune. Eleanor and Marcus were there dressed up and proud. Sarah was there with her partner. Gabriel came home from graduate school for the event. Even Judge Evelyn Thorne came, though I didn't know she'd be there until I saw her studying one of my pieces with an unreadable expression. I stood in front of my largest work, a piece I'd titled "Know and Still Loving." It was an abstract figure about 4 feet tall, made of ceramic and steel, deliberately shattered, and then reconstructed with thick veins of gold, copper, and silver. The figure's heart area was left open, a cavity filled with smaller broken pieces, all sealed together with gold. The cracks didn't weaken it. They were held safe within a frame of strong steel, radiating outward but contained. When it was time for my speech, I stepped up to the microphone they'd set up in the center of the gallery. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. I looked out at the sea of faces and began. My name is Alyssa Vance. I grew up with file numbers instead of photo albums, with caseworkers instead of parents, with rules about when I was allowed to cry and how much space I was allowed to take up. I learned early that some people see children as burdens to be discarded when they become inconvenient. But I also learned that some people see broken things and decide they're worth gold. I told them about kintsugi, about how the Japanese art of golden repair teaches us that damage and repair are part of an object's history, not something to hide, but something to highlight. I told them my art was born from that philosophy, from the radical idea that being broken didn't make me worthless. It made me unique. I want to thank some people. I continued, my voice growing stronger. Sarah Jenkins, who told me it wasn't my fault when I needed to hear it. Eleanor and Marcus Olson, who gave me gloves and an apron and told me I'd need protection, not because the world was cruel, but because creation requires tools. Every teacher who saw potential instead of problems. Everyone who looked at my cracks and decided I was worth gold. I paused, gathering courage for what came next. To the people who gave birth to me and then threw me away, I want you to know something. You didn't break me. You tried, but you failed. I survived you. I thrived without you, and I'm done letting you haunt the edges of my life. The cracks in my work represent trauma, yes, but they also represent survival. They're sealed with gold because I decided I was worth it. Not you. Me. The audience was silent, every eye on me. I pulled out a piece of paper, unfolded it. I received a threat recently from someone trying to control my narrative. They said if I didn't meet their demands, they'd tell the press the real story about me. So I'm going to tell it myself in my own words, in my own time, so no one can use it against me again. I read portions of the new statement I'd written, the one that laid bare my journey from abandonment through foster care to this moment. When I finished, there was a beat of silence, and then the room erupted in applause. People were crying. Eleanor was crying. Even Marcus had suspiciously bright eyes. But I wasn't done. One more thing, Keg, I said. Tonight I'm announcing the creation of the Chloe Liam Scholarship Fund. It's named for my brother and sister who were divided from me by a system that prioritized parents' wishes over children's needs. This fund will provide support for foster youth who've been separated from their siblings, travel money so they can visit each other, art supplies and materials, therapy, whatever they need to maintain those connections and heal those wounds. The applause was deafening. People surged forward to talk to me, to congratulate me, to ask about the scholarship fund. Local news outlets wanted interviews. Judge Thorne made her way through the crowd and shook my hand firmly. That took courage, she said quietly. I'm proud of you, Ms. Vance. I was riding high on adrenaline and triumph when a gallery assistant approached me with an apologetic expression. Alyssa, there are some people in the back office who say they're family. They're insisting on seeing you. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly who it was. For a moment, I considered having security remove them. But then I thought, no, this ends tonight. On my terms. In my space. I'll see them, I said. But give me 5 minutes. I went to my studio bag and pulled out the small frame I'd brought, the one containing the broken clay fox from that night when I was 14. I'd found the pieces years later when I was cleaning out the old house, salvaging what I could before it was sold. I'd repaired the fox with gold, sealing the breaks so thoroughly that you could barely tell where the pieces met. I walked into the back office. Victor and Scarlett were there with 2 other people, presumably their lawyer, and someone else, maybe a financial advisor. The office was small, cramped, and suddenly felt airless. They had contracts spread across the desk. More demands. More attempts to profit from my success. Victor stood when I entered, his expression a careful blank. Scarlett tried for a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Alyssa, Victor said, we need to talk about your future, about securing your financial stability, about family responsibilities. I didn't sit down. I walked to the desk and set the small gilded fox on top of their papers. This is my answer. I said, my voice calm and clear. This is the piece you threw away when you divided up your children like property. I kept it. I repaired it. I sealed the cracks with gold. It's my permanent reminder of why I will never sign anything you put in front of me. I pulled out a folder of my own, one that Mara had prepared. Here's what I'm willing to do. Here's a list of debt consolidation services. Here's information about bankruptcy proceedings. Here's a check made out directly to Chloe's medical providers for her recent emergency room visit. Scarlett told me about it last week when she showed up at my studio crying. That check is my gift to my sister, not to you. It will be paid directly to the hospital. You will not touch it. Victor's face reddened. This is insulting. We're your parents. No, I said, and the word was a sword. You're the people who gave birth to me and then threw me away. There's a difference. Scarlett tried her last manipulation. I chose Chloe because she was weaker. I knew you were strong enough to survive on your own. I laughed, and it was sharp and cold. No, that's the story you tell yourself so you can sleep at night. You didn't choose Chloe because she was weaker. You chose her because she was easier to control. You didn't choose me because you knew I'd ask questions. I was the inconvenient one. The one who wouldn't take your bullshit without fighting back. So you left me behind, figuring I wouldn't matter, that I'd just disappear into the system. But I didn't. I found people who actually loved me. And I'm done being the ghost you only remember when you need money. Victor slammed his hand on the desk. You ungrateful little... The door opened. Liam stood there. My brother, who I hadn't seen in 7 years, who was now 22 years old and looked exhausted and sad and determined. He walked past Victor and came to stand beside me, putting a hand on my shoulder. Dad, stop, Liam said, his voice shaking but firm. Just stop. Alyssa's right. You threw her away. You made her sleep on the floor, and you divided us up like we were furniture, and you never once asked if any of us wanted this. I heard what she said out there. I heard how she survived, and I'm not going to help you guilt her into giving you money just because you screwed up your finances. Victor stared at his son in shock. Scarlett started crying, the manipulative kind where she gasps and wails. But Liam didn't budge. He squeezed my shoulder. I support you, Al. Whatever you decide, I support you. I looked at my biological parents one final time. This is my final word. This is the last time we'll have this conversation. No. No to your manipulation. No to your games. No to your guilt trips. No to your attempts to profit from my success. No to you using my story or my name or my reputation for your benefit. This is my life, my story, my work, mine, not yours to sell or trade or use. Now get out of my gallery. They tried to argue. Victor blustered and threatened. Scarlett cried harder. Their lawyer started citing precedents. But I stood firm, and Liam stood with me, and eventually they had no choice but to leave. They gathered their papers and their righteous indignation and walked out into the night. After they left, Liam and I stood in the small office, the silence settling around us like dust. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you back then. I was just a kid, and I didn't know how, but I should have tried. You were 12, I said softly. It wasn't your job to protect me. It was theirs, and they failed. Still, he said, I missed you. I want you to know that. Victor told me you didn't want contact with any of us, that you'd moved on and forgotten about us. But I never forgot you, Al. I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of my work, of the scholarship fund announcement, of the family I'd built with the Olsons. This is my life now, I said. These are my people. You're welcome to be part of it if you want, but only if you're really here for me, not for them. I want to be part of it, he said immediately. I want to know my sister again. We talked for an hour, catching up on lost years, sharing stories, building fragile new bridges. Eventually, Gabriel came looking for me, concerned that I'd been gone so long. He saw Liam and gave me a questioning look. I introduced them. This is my brother Liam. Liam, this is Gabriel, also my brother. Gabriel grinned and shook Liam's hand. Cool. The more the merrier. Now come on, Al. You've got collectors waiting to buy your work and reporters wanting interviews. You can have a family reunion later. I went back out into the gallery, back into the light and noise and celebration. I stood in front of No and Still Loving, my largest piece, and touched the golden veins running through the steel and ceramic. The cracks had healed. The story was mine. I had won. The exhibition was a massive success. 12 of the 15 pieces sold that night. The scholarship fund raised $8,000 in donations before the event even ended. I gave interviews about my work about kintsugi, about foster care and resilience. I didn't hide my story or sanitize it. I owned every crack, every break, every golden repair. In the weeks and months that followed, my career took off. I was commissioned for public art installations. I was invited to show work in galleries across the state. I was accepted into a prestigious MFA program with a full scholarship. The Chloe Liam Scholarship Fund grew, providing support for dozens of foster youth trying to maintain sibling connections. Liam and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully, like pieces of broken pottery being fitted back together. He apologized for the years of silence, explained how Victor had controlled the narrative and kept us apart. We started meeting for coffee once a week, then dinner once a month, gradually becoming real siblings again instead of just people who shared DNA. Chloe reached out eventually too, once she turned 18 and escaped Scarlett's control. She was damaged, traumatized, struggling with anxiety and depression, but she was also brave and kind and determined to heal. I helped her get into therapy, connected her with resources, and introduced her to the Olsons, who welcomed her like they'd welcomed me. Scarlett and Victor tried a few more times to reach out to demand money or attention or forgiveness. Each time I said no. Each time it got easier. Eventually, they stopped trying. I heard through Liam that they'd filed for bankruptcy, lost, the big house moved to a smaller place across town. Part of me felt sad for them, but it was a distant sadness like mourning strangers. They'd made their choices. I'd made mine. 5 years after that opening night at Foundry Hall, I had my first solo exhibition at a major museum. The show was called Golden Fire in the Cracks, and it featured 30 large-scale works exploring themes of trauma resilience repair and transformation. The centerpiece was a massive installation, a room-sized sculpture made of thousands of broken ceramic pieces all sealed together with gold, copper, and silver, creating a kind of glowing, fractured cave that visitors could walk through. At the opening, I gave another speech. Eleanor and Marcus were there, older now, but still my anchors. Sarah was there now, the director of her own nonprofit serving foster youth. Mara was there with her wife. Gabriel was there with his fiancée. Liam was there with Chloe. Judge Thorne was there. All my people, all the ones who'd seen my cracks and decided I was worth gold. 5 years ago, I said, standing in front of my community, I stood in a gallery and told a difficult truth about where I came from. Tonight, I want to tell you about where I'm going. I'm building a foundation literally called Golden Repair Foundation to provide art therapy and materials to children in foster care. I'm opening a studio space where foster youth can come and create, where they can learn that their broken pieces are worthy of gold. I'm using everything I learned, all my cracks and repairs, to help other kids who are sitting on cold floors wondering if anyone will remember their names. The applause was thunderous, but more important was the feeling in my chest, warm and solid and real. I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and transformed it. I'd turned abandonment into advocacy. I'd turned damage into art. I'd taken the cracks in my life and sealed them with gold, and now I was teaching others to do the same. After the speech, I walked through the installation, trailing my fingers along the golden seams. Visitors moved around me, awed by the way light reflected off thousands of repairs. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, tugged on her mother's hand and said, "Mommy, it's more beautiful because it's broken." Out of the mouths of babes, that was it exactly. More beautiful for having been broken. Stronger for having survived. Worthy not despite the damage, but because of everything I'd done to repair it. That night, after the crowds had gone and the gallery lights dimmed, I stood alone in my installation and thought about the 14-year-old girl I'd been, the one who sat on a cold floor and listened to her name disappear into silence, the one who thought she was throwaway, disposable, not worth fighting for. I wished I could go back and tell her, "You're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to take all this pain and turn it into something beautiful. You're going to find people who see your worth. You're going to learn that family is chosen, not given. You're going to discover that the cracks don't make you weak, they make you unique. You're going to seal them with gold and shine. But I couldn't go back. I could only move forward carrying my repairs like badges of honor, proof of survival evidence of resilience. The golden fire in my cracks wasn't just art. It was life. It was hope. It was the knowledge that broken things with the right care and the right people could be made whole again. Different than before, yes. Marked by damage, absolutely. But whole, and beautiful, and strong, and most importantly, mine. Your cracks don't define you unless you let them. They're part of your story, but they're not the end of it. You get to choose what comes next. You get to choose who repairs you and how and with what materials. My advice: choose gold. Choose people who see your worth. Choose yourself over and over again until saying no to the things that hurt you becomes as natural as breathing. And always remember, the most beautiful things in the world are the ones that survived being broken and decided they were worth repairing. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to say no to family? How did you rebuild after being broken? What does your golden repair look like? Drop your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about resilience, survival, and the radical act of choosing yourself. Your story matters. Your cracks are worthy of gold.